Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I can see from your names that we have a lot of old friends here. So welcome to everyone. And welcome to you if you're new to this as well, because this is a webinar of the BCS, the British Computer Society, and more specifically of the London North, Central and South branches of the British Computer Society, along with Green IT and other great groups in the BCS. And hopefully you're a BCS member. Otherwise, excuse me, I recommend check it out and come and join us if you can. Well, I'd like to hand you over to our expert coordinator for this session. And as far as the session is concerned, he will tell you about the presenter and about the other details of what this session is going to be about. It's about e-waste, I know that, but perhaps I could introduce you now to my colleague, Santana Lewis, to take it away and tell us more. Santana, over to you.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Global Recycling Day, and we're going to talk about, presenters going to talk about e-waste challenges, opportunities, and the future trends. Scott Butler is the Executive Director at Material Focus. He's a business sustainability and tech expert for over 20 years, and he's working at Material Focus and a European recycling platform. And he's worked at different organizations, including the Environment Agency, and set up a lot of movements with the sustainability, circular economy, and change programs. His key achievements in setting up Material Focus, which is a non-for-profit, a leading UK-wide recycling, electrical behavior change campaign. He's also his career in sustainability policies for science museum groups, including the first ever National Museum and Galleries and Environment Forum, bringing together the South Kensington Museum, National Galleries, Royal Parks and Royal Albert Hall, and the Royal Geographical Society. His first-class academic background with MSc in Environmental Technology from Imperial College and the MBA from Warwick Business School. So this evening, without further ado, we'll listen to Scott about the e-waste challenges that we have. As you know, each one of us has plenty of devices and it has impacts on our environment, and we have to start thinking about how we can process these e-waste better. So over to you, Scott, and I hope you can enlighten us this evening. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Santana, and thanks to all of you at the British Computer Society to provide me with this opportunity to talk about electrical waste. I mean, it's a tough thing to talk about in the sense that there's so much to talk about. So I'm not going to cover every single issue today. Some of you may be pleased to hear, but I'm just trying to pick out some of the sort of most interesting, what I think are some of the most interesting ones, and pose a few sort of questions and uncertainties, which hopefully will help trigger, the Q&A debate later on as well, which for me is always the sort of most interesting bit, because that's where you start to learn about the angles and maybe learn some new ideas and new thoughts from people. So I'll crack on. Hopefully you can see the screen. Firstly, I'll explain what Material Focus do. So we're a not-for-profit, independent sustainability organization. We work in the field of waste electricals and waste portable batteries. And we're funded through the regulatory system, but we're independent of government and we're independent of producers, the waste management industry, and others. And we've created a strategy. Basically, we want to live in a world where materials are never wasted. And our priority at the moment is around waste electricals, which is the fastest growing waste stream in the world and contains some of the most precious materials on the planet. So we do that in three main areas. We have three main programs. We have our Insights program, and here we fund research basically to learn more about electrical waste and the system, behavior change, consumer attitudes. So it can move from sort of relatively mainstream public attitudes and behaviors, so sort of, you know, opinion sort of polls and things like that, that we then analyze and turn into actions, through to some quite technical stuff. So we've looked at persistent organic pollutants in waste electrical plastics. We've looked at critical raw material recovery from smart devices and what we can do there to get hold of the stuff that makes it smart that we need for the future green technology future that we're all aiming for. So that's our insight strand. All of this is widely available on our website. Everything we produce is for public perusal and use, and we encourage that. We have an investment strand. Here we invest in local authorities, community sector organizations and other organizations, which help make it easier for people to do what we want them to do, which is to reuse and recycle their electricals. And we're not just about recycling, we're pro keeping products in life, donations into those who need it, be it for education, a lot of digital inclusion issues in lockdown, for example, but also donations of household appliances, which could be put to use for people who don't have easy access to finances to be able to afford new ones. We want to make recycling the minimum thing that everybody does. And at the moment, particularly with small electricals, too often they're placed into the bin and those resources are lost forever. So we're making recycle the minimum worst thing people do, but we're also promoting better behaviors across the top of it. And then we have our inspiration strand, which is the Recycle Your Electricals campaign, which I'll show you a little bit more about. And that's what we've been running for the last couple of years now, which is a national behavior change campaign, which is basically raising awareness to people that they can and should always recycle their electricals as a minimum, and also getting them to go to our postcode locator where they can find their nearest drop-off point to do that. We started with around 3,000 verified locations. We've already got 7,000 on there, and we expect more to go on there soon. So after this session, I'd urge people to take a look at search Recycle Your Electricals, pop in your postcode and you'll find your nearest drop-off point. So what have we been doing? As I said, we've it's almost our year anniversary, actually. Our launch event was meant to be March 17th in 2020. And some of you may recall, I think that was the day after a certain Boris Johnson asked the whole country to stay indoors, and little did we know what impact that would have. But we kept on going, we pivoted. And since then, we believe we've had a lot of impact. And this is a little out of date, actually. This is about 6 months out of date. But we've got 5,000 reuse and recycling points on our website. We've helped 2 million more people in the sense of making it easier through curbside collections and drop-off points across various projects across the country, from the Orkneys down to the Isles of Scilly. So we're pan-UK. The number here is 702,000. We've actually had 1 million recycling searches on our website, which is a sort of proxy of a sale for us if people are searching and finding where they can recycle. We hope that they will then do that. And since we've launched, nearly half the people who've seen our campaign, and of course, it's difficult to get in front of everybody to see it, but half the people who've seen it have said that they will recycle their electricals in future as a result of the information that we've done. These are only indicators, but they're very good positive ones. So what is the issue? What is this challenge of e-waste? So e-waste, or WE, is old and unwanted electrical and electronic equipment, and it's everywhere. You just have to look at your homes, or if you look outside when you're on the streets, tech is an increasing part of our personal lives, our professional lives, the urban environment. Discarded electricals are one of the fastest growing sources of waste in the world, and that includes the UK. We're very much addicted to our tech. And that actually ultimately poses a major threat to the environment, to human health, if they're not handled properly. Because we're losing the value in there, and we're potentially causing hazardous issues in the wild environment as well as the built environment. Anything with a plug, battery and cable can and should always be recycled. So that's an important thing to flag. Anything, any electrical, we've done surveys as the public, who we ask them when we show them pictures, we'll show them pictures of an electric toothbrush and ask them, do they think it's an electrical or not? And they say no. because they really only focus on the toothbrush bits of it. And then you go, no, it's electrical and all that stuff can be recycled. They genuinely didn't know that and weren't aware of that. And that's more common than you think. And also regulations to deal with this have been in place for about 15 years now. So this isn't a new issue. We've had waste electrical regulations in the UK since the early 2000s, but a lot more still needs to be done. Our major focus is on small electricals because they're very binnable. And if people aren't aware of what to do with it, they do two things. So we know that around 155,000 tons of small kitchen electricals, toothbrushes, cables, chargers, all of us seem to have the ubiquitous cable drawer with a HDMI and an ISDN cable, but perhaps a remote control from a DVD player that's long gone. That stuff is very common in lots of people's houses. But not just that, people are either throwing it away, like I said, or we're hoarding it as well. And hoarding is a big issue where we think over 500 million small old electricals, nearly 20 items a household are just being left unused, electricals just being sat dormant for people not, probably because people weren't quite sure what to do with them, felt that there might be some value in them, but let's put them away. We also know that business electricals are being thrown away too. And if you think about most businesses, that's not the IT necessarily. So the IT, there's a lot, as you will know, I'm sure many of you on this call, are very active asset management programs, and a lot of IT firms manage their IT purposefully with mind to managing the costs and potential income from that. But if you look at most offices, there's a lot of domestic like electricals too. And also when you have office and shop refits, there's a lot of electricals, a lot of lighting, aircon and those sort of things as well. So we're throwing away an awful lot of electricals. And if they go down the wrong route, it's very likely that we'll use the aluminium, the copper, the steel, the lithium, the plastics even, all of which can be recycled will be lost forever. So if resources go to landfill or fly tip, then we're losing them. There's the economic thing around the value of this copper, this aluminium and steel. UK householders also could make money from selling some of their old tech. And then we've got the big issue that sort of underpins everything, net zero, climate change, and recycling electricals, we've found out through our research, could cut as much CO2 as taking 1.3 million cars off the road. That is if we recycled everything that we currently don't, either by throwing it away or hoarding it. And really, what are the benefits of doing it? It's not a cost, just a cost, it's a benefit. So yeah, sustainability, more sustainable economy is a benefit to all of us. There is value in there. So we did a study, I think 850,000 engagement rings could be made from the gold that's currently thrown away in smart devices. Householders could benefit if they sold some of the old but working and potentially sellable tech. And also there's a UK PLC thing here. If we recycle these electricals, we can create hundreds of jobs in logistics, in recycling in the UK. Excuse me, I'll just take a short break to drink something. So here we see this is an international issue. And you can see that Europe and the West is a big user of electricals and a big generator of waste. So this is the waste generated per capita annually. And you can see here that the UK is the second largest generator of waste electricals per capita in the world. But you can also see that variance. So you've got the Western countries like Germany, Norway, UK, and US generating a lot of WEEE. Japan, high-tech country. Then you also see India and overall, and you start to see this picture that it's a rising trend. More electrical waste is being generated per head of population. And what would have been considered developing countries are now developed and increasingly using tech too. So here's another way of looking at some of those numbers. So 2014, around 44 million tons of global e-waste was generated. By 2019, that had already increased by almost 10 million, so 53.6. And when you look at the trend, we're on trend by 2030, which is not that far away to be around 75 million tons of e-waste generated per year. Also, you'll see that only a small proportion of that is actually properly documented. That means tracked and traced through regulated systems. So we've got an awful lot of activity globally that is currently unknown. And that is troubling for lots of reasons. Mainly the reasons also said before is if we don't know where it's going, it's very likely that it's not being recycled. Or if it is being recycled by incredibly low standards, And therefore, there are concerns about the impact on the local environment, but also the health and safety of the people who were doing that work. And here's just another way of looking at how the distribution trends. Europe, very high in terms of how much is generated, and per capita, the highest, head of the Americas. You see Asia large, not as large, but starting to grow. Equally the same with Africa, and then in Australasia, very high use as well. So, you know, this is distributed differently across the planet. And finally, just looking at that issue that I said before about what's documented or what's not. The estimation is that around 17% is actually properly documented and therefore properly recycled. But we're into the 80% plus that we don't really know what's happening to it. And that's some of the information gaps and the regulatory gaps that need to be plugged. A lot of what will fix this is behavior change as well. And here's just a chart from an academic called BJ Fogg, I think from Stanford University, which just tries to explain how do we get people to change their behavior. So on one axis, you've got motivation, and the other, you've got ability. And what it's essentially saying is that if motivation is high and something is easy to do, then any sort of nudges and prompts that we would want to make can have an impact. So you, through clear, consistent drop-off points, through signage, through good information point of sale, through good marketing campaigns, social media, radio, etc., then we can actually make the change that we need to do. But the biggest challenge in the UK is actually ease. It's not motivation. 80% of people in the UK are pretty much pro-recycling. They just need somebody to nudge them, to tell them what to do and where to do it, and for that action to be easy. And in the UK at the moment, it's still too difficult. So we have a strong foundation of a collection network through local authorities, but it only works for a certain type of person who has access to car. It works for large vehicles, but it's not necessarily dealing with some of these small electricals, and also younger, more urban dwellers who ain't necessarily aware of where their local authority site is, or have access to a car to even go to it if they did. And what are the biggest barriers? This is through market research that we've done. People don't know where to recycle it, and they weren't aware that it could be recycled. So that's what we're doing on the awareness raising campaign. Anything with a plug, battery and cable. All electricals can be recycled, never bin electricals. Be wary of hidden batteries inside electricals that could cause problems. That sort of stuff is what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And what are the biggest motivators for people? So why are we selling this? And we're a positive environmental campaign. We're not guilting people into doing things. We're saying, look, this is a really good thing that we can all do. People are really motivated by understanding that recycling materials in old electricals reduces the need for new mines, and that sort of, oh, wow, it contains precious metals which can be reused and repurposed. So that does play well as well. So what has worked for us? So some of you may have seen this character, not necessarily the obvious choice, but we're trying to cut through. And the way that we're cutting through with our main messenger is Hypnocat. He's a hypnotic cat who's hypnotizing the nation. He's a master of persuasion, and he's hypnotizing the nation into recycling their electricals. And he's been our main messenger when it comes to cutting through, using local authorities and using others. And next week, for a couple of weeks, we are dipping our toe, or he is dipping his paw, into the world of TV advertising. And you will start, if you do watch live TV, I know people don't necessarily do that, you will start to see him out and about, hopefully. And look out for it, because if you do see it, I guarantee you won't forget it. And we've been using him in a very core behavior change way. We're trying to get out and about and get people to see him in as many different places and in different ways, so it becomes part of the normal thing to do, and to try and encourage people to make recycling a normal thing, social norming, essentially. And we also try and localize it where we can as well. So here you see him out and about. He's on waste vehicles, he's on billboards, he's talking to humans of Sheffield, humans of Havering. From a behavior change perspective, that's really powerful, because people think, okay, if everyone in Havering is recycling, then I should be recycling too. We're also trying to get people involved at key moments in the customer journey. So we're working with retailers. We're very much increasing the pressure on retailers. We had to hold off a little bit during the pandemic because of social distancing and all the other challenges that they need. But retailers really need to step up here. And again, this consistency of message and communications can help. But we're also not just doing that sort of marketing. We're also using PR and news stories and research to land in mainstream media in different ways. So we've done collaborations with Nicola Roberts from Girls Aloud. wearing a dress made of cables. Lily Cole with the gold rings. Paul Lewis, who is a money box expert from BBC Radio 4, and Connie Huck. And top right as well, that's a DJ called, I always want to call him Banksy because he's from Bristol, but of course he's not Banksy, he's Damsey. But we did a program where we used local celebrities in the Bristol area to demonstrate the amount of electricals that they had in their homes, and also cut across that, you know, electricals are everywhere. And we have achieved that. We've made it mainstream. We've had Xander Rhodes leading coverage in the Daily Telegraph. We've had the Guardian pick up on that. Don't be like, be better than Jeff Bezos sort of stories. We've been in Forbes, Daily Mail, Good Housekeeping, Grazia, The Star, The Sun. And we've had more mentions of electricals and e-waste and recycling than there's ever been. And we've got an upward trend cycling on that. You may have seen a piece in the Financial Times last week where we've been focusing on the terrible waste of resources and environmental challenges posed by disposable single-use vapes. A lot of hard research that sits behind those stories, but we very much pride ourselves in being able to make this topic newsworthy and interesting and engaging. And then moving on, I think I've rattled through this, but hopefully, yeah, we're fine. Looking at the future, and you know, if you can predict the future, then this, you know, we'd all be millionaires. So just look at this with a pinch of salt. But these are some of the talking points that I think might be interesting when we get to the Q&A. So future trends. First one is a question: is green purchasing becoming more mainstream? Always feels like we're on the cusp of something when people talk about, you know, eco-based purchases. People aren't as interested in price just as much, just price. They're interested in the eco credentials, the sustainability credentials. I think that's a real challenge in tight cost of living and the financial position of the economy over the recent months and post-pandemic. Is that true or not? But there are indications that people are more mindful in their purchases, and that's also including purchasing less, perhaps. But I reserve judgment on that too. One thing that we need to get better at is the recovery of critical raw materials from smart tech and batteries, because we need those for future green tech. A lot of renewable technologies, a lot of electricity storage solutions, batteries, rely on those raw materials. And there's a geopolitical dimension to that, with the main sources of them at the moment aren't the most friendly to the West countries. So there are concerns about security of supply too. Do we value social impacts more? So are people better recognizing that through donation to increase reuse, if we provide affordable tech and appliances to those in need, you know, are we recognizing and able to tell that story better than we have done in the past? Heads up on something we'll be doing later in this year is a concept that we've called fad tech. So you're the first people to hear about this actually internally. We've been talking about it internally. This is the idea of things like juicers and bread makers and George Foreman grills and air fryers. Every year there's some sort of gadget or gizmo that becomes trendy, and many of them end up in the back of people's kitchen cupboards and are never used again. And we're sort of interested in that as potentially being a good story to cut through. The rise of fast tech. Here you've got disposable single-use vapes, earpods, novelties, the infamous Christmas gin bottle from Marks and Spencer's that lights up. The rise of fit tech, so more wearables. If any of you watch sports, you'll see at the end of the game when players remove their sort of shirts, they're all wearing tracker vests, which is analyzing their position and how much they run and their heartbeats and all those sort of things. And then you've got the, you know, Fit watches and all those other things are ubiquitous now. If you go onto Amazon and put in Fitbit, you see the sort of brand knockoffs of around £10. That's fast. That sort of is a combination of fast tech and fit tech. You've also got health tech too, which is slightly different, but smart pill boxes, electronic blood collection devices, and I think, you know, you only see the trajectory of tech becoming part of many more things, and that's a bit of a concern, because people are putting products. The single-use vape is a great example of a disastrous product, environmentally speaking, and from a fire safety perspective, with the risk of the lithium battery catching on fire if destroyed, and hundreds of millions of these are littered across the country. From an environmental perspective, that product should never have ever launched. This gets a bit more conceptual now, I think, but yeah, things like oh, apologies for that. Go back to that. Here we go. Yeah, hire and leasing of products. So instead of people buying products, you're actually hiring and leasing them. So it's a service model rather than a product-based model. Could have impacts around who owns stuff and where it ends up. So are you providing a service on the specific performance, like cleaning clothes, rather than the actual washing machine to clean the clothes, as being one of those examples? Incentivized return systems for used products. That's been proposed. That's like a deposit return system that you may have heard about, that's being proposed in Scotland at the moment. Similar sort of thing. Could you imagine that? Yeah, you buy whatever you buy a vape. Let's use vape as an example, and included in that is a £1 deposit. So instead of the £5, it's £6, and then when you return that vape, you get that £1 back. Asset management. That's a really big thing where IT can play a role, where you're actively, if you sell a product as a service, you actively manage the use and performance of that product, and you therefore manage the reuse, repair, and redeployment of those assets with proper tracking and tracing and assessment. Collaborative consumption, these things like libraries of things. Use some crazy stuff. There's something like the average life, and I'm making this up, so don't quote me on the actual stat, but the average drill is used for 27 minutes in its lifetime. Yet everybody's got 90% of UK households have an electric drill. Is that a really efficient and effective way of using those resources? And also products being designed for long life. There's a big debate about inbuilt obsolescence, not least with tech items particularly, and that's a combination of obsolescence from hardware or obsolescence from software too. And I'm sure you've got many opinions around whether products are delivered, whether the software updates are as needed as they might be, particularly if they push well-working devices over the edge into not being supported anymore. And here I just wanted to flag up, because I'm just trying to understand the audience, but I know many of you will work in businesses too. And just we did some research into business electricals, and just wanted to clarify what businesses' responsibilities are. They do have a duty of care to responsibly dispose of all their waste materials, and that includes their electricals. So here we just flag up what businesses can do. They can reuse where possible, so donating to local reuse organizations, passing on to staff, or working with ITADs, information technology asset disposal organizations is part of that. They can directly contact approved authorized treatment facilities. We've got a list of those on our website, so that's one route. They could look at who produced those electricals. So they could go, if they've got a suite of HP or Dell laptops or desktops, they can go and contact them. Or they also could talk to local businesses too. There's a public register, an approved authorized treatment facility public register, which will list all of those approved recyclers by the environment agencies across the UK. And this is something else also that's a bit of a work in progress that we've been working on. We call it, at the moment, it's digital inclusion and electricals for good. So digital divide is a big issue, has been for a number of years. There's a lot of great organizations who are working to plug that gap, but it was definitely amplified during COVID, not least with kids at school, kids home from school without access to tech to be able to deal with the, okay, it wasn't anywhere near like the full school experience, but they were missing out on that access to the remote learning. So what we do know is that many tech items, phones, laptops are sitting unused. A lot of people active, and we're working with them to see whether we can help knit together a national solution that allows businesses and the public to be able to donate their tech to help people. So the message there is donate to help people, recycle to help the planet, essentially. And we're also now looking at whether we can move that into general electric donations. So things like microwaves and toasters and kettles. There's a surprising amount of people who don't have access to what many would now consider to be basic tech. And one way that we can do that is, okay, a lot of that stuff maybe should be recycled, but there's still some, pockets of gold in there that can actually be cleaned up, can be repaired, and can be used by somebody who could really need them. Again, emphasizing donate to help people, recycle to help the planet. We're also developing, we can't do this on our own, as you would expect, so we've got a number of partnerships. So this is the major sort of retail partnerships that we have at the moment. Currys, John Lewis Music Magpie, Vodafone, through to some of the buyback return sort of offers. Refurbished tech is, I think with smartphones, that tipping point has happened. A lot more people are now prepared to buy a refurbished smartphone than they ever were before. I just think anecdotally, and you see the rise of these Mazillions, the Music Magpie, the Reeboks, the back market, definitely a lot of interest in that when it comes to smart tech. Where we can maybe assist a lot more is the stuff that's maybe not as sexy as the smart tech, which is still, as I said earlier, too often going into bins. So this is something, again, trying to judge the audience here, something that you might be able to want to think about, and opportunities where you as a champion within your own organizations could get involved. We've got International E-Waste Day in October, and there we work with partners to amplify what we're doing, but also to try and encourage employees to take action. So that could be you setting up drop-off points for International E-Waste Day or the week around there, and we can help you with the comms for your team, so you can do an amnesty day for your staff and get them really engaged in this issue. We've got Give Back January, which we do most years, which is where we're thinking of launching this Digital for Good and Electrical for Goods initiative. And also following us, we are very active on social media, and we all know the best way that social media works is through other people amplifying what others, people amplifying what others are doing and spreading out through their channels too. And we, I would say this because I sign most of it off, but we do some interesting stuff. We do some very visual stuff. HypnoCat does little factoids and things like that as well. So we've got a number of flavors that I'm sure some are suitable for all organizations to push. And then, as I said earlier, coming soon, HypnoCat is coming to your TV screen. So he's across all the major commercial channels, ITV and Sky channels, including the sport and the other specialist channels too. And yeah, I think if you do see him, you won't forget it the first time you see the ad. So I'm looking forward to getting reactions from that. And we're hoping that we can see a real measurable impact in terms of the amount of people doing what we're asking them to do, which is recycle their electricals. So coming to the end, the main takeaways, if I may suggest, are that old, unused, unwanted broken electricals are everywhere. People should donate unwanted working or fixable electricals. Why not? Because that will mean that working useful products can be put to good use. And why shouldn't we clear out our old homes and our old and broken electricals, make some space at home and recycle them? So if we're donating to help people, let's recycle to help the planet. And that means that all the aluminium, copper, gold, lithium are made of, are recovered and are used again. Remember this, anything with a plug, battery and cable can be donated or recycled. The minimum thing that you should do with it is recycle it. You should never, ever bin an electrical, which is anything with a plug, battery or cable. So you can help people and help the planet by never binning electricals and always making sure that they are donated or they're recycled. So that's an example of some of the socials that I said and some of the ways that we use HypnoCat and some of the mad stats. We did a stat where we found out that there's enough cables in the UK to circle, sitting in drawers to circle the earth more than 5 times. There are over 8 million unwanted hairdryers as well in the UK as well. So that's a quick summary of some of the things that we do. We do an awful lot more than that. I'm really proud of my team. We've got a small team of 10 of us at the moment. One of us has just moved on, but really proud of the work that we've done and really confident that we can continue. And I really hope that you, in your small ways, can become ambassadors and amplifiers of the important message that people should, as a minimum, always recycle their electricals. Thanks for the time. So I'm not sure who steps in now. So
Santana, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Scott, for your presentation, and we are looking forward to the advert. And your presentation was very insightful and a lot of things that most of us might not be aware of, and trying to use your website to find the sources where we can recycle some of this equipment will be great. I had a question mainly about behavioral changes and how we can get schools, universities and colleges and workplaces to sort of get into that swing of reusing, and how we get people of influence to encourage students and work champions to sort of promote some of this work. Is there any sort of tips you could give us on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can never underestimate the power of, enthusiasm. So having somebody who's in a position of influence, whatever that be, they don't need to be, senior. Their position of influence just could be that they're enthusiastic and want to do the right thing. And we do have school. We probably would have done more for schools sooner had there not been the global situation we found ourselves in. So we sort of turned the volume down on what we expected for school. But we do have a schools pack, and we are increasing our focus on that. I think the thing to step back and reflect upon and just bear in mind is that it's a very noisy world, and lots of people are competing for our attention. And I don't see our competitors as other NGOs or environmental campaigns. I come at this as our competitors are Apple, the Toyota, the Nestle, because they've got massive budgets and they're basically bombarding us with messages to buy their stuff because that's the model, that's the economic model. And we're trying to do the same thing. What we're trying to get people to buy is recycling, which is, not as immediate a concept, because you don't look as, well, I would say you do look as cool, but you don't look as cool doing, recycling your drawer of cables as you do, driving your brand new Land Rover or something like that. So that's who we're competing with. So I think just always bear that in mind, I think, from contact. So that's why we do what we do with a pink cat and all these other things, is try and zig when everybody's zagging. And we can't go toe to toe when it comes to budget, but we can do something different through our messaging. And I think that's the same with finding those champions I know it's a long-winded way of getting around through it, but that's the same as finding champions in workplaces, at schools and at colleges, at universities, is if you can find the right people, they're the best people to be championing in those communities, because they're a voice, they're a face in that community. People look to them. And that's what we're encouraging through the comms. We've got a university program this year, where end of term is a particular challenge, not just for waste electricals, but for waste as a whole. And I think over time what's interesting, and I think it came up a lot with single-use vapes, is that you have a cohort, a generation who's very climate conscious, and talks and looks at a generation, I guess my generation now, and says, you screwed up the planet. Look what you've left us with. Yet when it comes to something like electricals and tech, and single-use vapes is a real sort of example of this, actually it's not the older generation who's the issue when it comes to that product. So there's a bit of an inconsistency, and I think in words and behavior, and that's life. Let's not beat about the bush. We're all a bit inconsistent sometimes. We don't always live all of our values, but I think that could create some tension and a good talking point about, and make this interesting and engaging, to say, actually, so instead of just, I think the problem is if we just go in with, and as you can see from our stuff, where I describe it as being unapologetically positive. We are not guilting people into doing this. We're saying this is a really positive thing that you can do. So we need to get better at supporting those champions, and we will do that. But the first thing is trying to smoke those out as well through the comms that we're doing, and it'd be great if we were being inundated with, I want to be a champion at my school, I want to be a champion at my university, and we'll respond to that too. But we're trying to hit a lot of people all at the same time.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. We've got a question. Kirsty was asking a question about anything on the supply side. So do you have anything you could elaborate on that?
Can Kirsty just clarify? I don't know if you can join, ask the question, just so I can answer it, because there's a lot on the supply side. I just want to make sure I'm answering the point.
I think it's about the production of the goods to begin with.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm aware of that. I mean, that's outside of our scope as an organisation, but there is a lot being done at European and global level around on that production end, is because that's where a lot of the environmental impact is. Certainly around design for durability, which is that obsolescence thing I touched upon earlier. Design for recycling as well. So trying to create incentives for producers to make products that last longer and are more easily repairable. And also the right to repair is a big conversation in itself. There were lots of criticisms at big tech, particularly Apple, around how difficult it is to access spare parts and repair MacBooks and iPhones. So there is activity in that place. What's interesting with a lot of tech as well is the disconnect between where it's produced and where it's used. So a lot of the production takes place in Southeast Asia, but obviously a lot of the use and the disposal takes place in other countries as it stands at the moment. But of course, let's not beat about the bush. There's a lot of tech being used in China and increasingly in India too. So that scenario and situation is changing, and there will be a big issue with, it's a big issue for the UK. It's going to be a big issue for India and China and other growing countries too. No,
Yes,
I see. Yeah. Do you want me to? I'm happy to take the questions in the chat if you want me to do that, if it's easier from a flowing perspective.
Okay, if you could summarize it as well, so the video people will know where the question is.
Yeah, sure. So we got a question from Mike Davey, who's saying Microsoft Windows 11 is making computer systems older than 5 years obsolete. Do I believe that Microsoft adequately thought through the worldwide impact of hundreds of millions of desktop laptops being disposed in the next couple of years? I think it's fair to say they haven't adequately thought it through. I think, to be honest, they probably haven't thought it through at all, because the focus would have been different departments thinking about these things. They're rolling out Windows 11, to be frank, to make more money, to make more sales, and it has consequences, and in this instance it could have unintended consequences. It is possible, I know now, to run what's it called, Chrome. There is a sort of, it's possible to run Chrome on older laptops, and I know a lot of digital inclusion projects will do that, and a lot of schools are mainly Google Scholar now and or Chrome based, so G Suite based. So that's one way of doing it. It's not ideal, and I do think, yeah, the issue about obsolescence, particularly software driven obsolescence, needs a lot of work, and it's frustrating when a perfectly good piece of tech gets made obsolete because of version 11.1.2 sort of being automatically uploaded overnight, and then suddenly everything stops working.
I had a question regarding the right to repair. So in the UK Parliament at the moment, I think there was some debate going on about what they're going to do with that and enforce it for our supply chains and manufacturers. Is there any change on that? Because I think in some EU countries, they've already started to practice that in some of the regions. But here in the UK, has that been something they're agreeing to do now? Or?
You've had interesting, not to get too political, but post-Brexit, you've got some interesting challenges as to how the UK aligns with Europe on all manner of legislation. So 2-3 years ago, we were fully aligned on the WEEE regulations. And since then, there's not been any major update to the waste electrical regulations. So there's not been divergence. But we know that the UK is going to consult on new regulations for waste electricals this year. Touch wood, it should have been last year. And we know that you're starting to sort of see hints of what they call divergence in other areas. On the right to repair, that was my understanding, was that was sort of implemented equally in the UK and the EU. But in reality, when you dig behind it, it's not a right to, it's not a public right to repair. It's quite limited. It's limited to professional repairers. Okay, access to spare parts is sort of there, but there's no real service level agreement on that. We've done some other research which suggests that the cost of spare parts is often quite prohibitive, and there's no regulation on making them affordable. So in theory, you comply with the regulations, but if you make a new screen £350, no one's ever going to buy the screen and no one's ever going to repair anything. So it needs I think it needs an awful lot of work. And I think there's a lot of great projects, fixing factories, restart projects, those things tending to focus on smart devices, but not solely, but are interesting. But it's about impact, and that's the thing that how do we have mass impact? How do we change the dial? And I think those things are really good for the local communities in which they work. But we don't have the skills across the UK to scale that. You know, there are not. It tends to be reliant on a few volunteers with limited availabilities. You can't, you can't. And I think also people's expectations of not to judge, but we are connected to our phones. You know, the phone is the most important relationship most people have with it. You know, that they're touching it and feeling it all day. They're using it. Using it as their main source of information. All those sort of things. I think we moved from a place where a mobile phone was like an amazing, wow, I've got access to it, to it becoming an extension of ourselves. And it's very difficult to not be with it. It's that angst and that thing. So the expectations around having access immediately as well is potentially a limit to a lot of the potential of repair. Is that if you're a family, if you're a family with 3 kids and your washing machine breaks, you need it fixing very quickly. And if you phone somebody up and it's, oh, well, it's 50 quid minimum call out, I can't be there till next week, and there's no warranty when I repair it, you're going to buy a new one. You're going to take that judgment. And even if you're short of cash, you're going to do your best. And then you'll probably buy the cheapest one because that's the only one you can afford. And not to name any brands, but that cheap quality thing is not going to last you. And you've got yourself in a false economy. But that's real life, and that's how it's playing out. So I think there's lots of theoretical potential in right to repair, but there's lots of ways that producers can make it so difficult that actually people will go, it's not right for me, and look elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question about how people can get more involved in International E-Waste Day in October, and maybe if they could use some of the slides that you have presented.
Yeah, so best way is sign up to our website. So join us as a sort of registered, interested party. And what we will do is we will ping out a pack before International E-Waste Day. So we'll get everything together, and we put together like an engagement pack and advice and all the things. So the best thing to do to guarantee is sign up. We won't spam you, I promise. Anything that we send will be of massive importance and great relevance to you. But no, that's the best way of keeping in touch with us. And we will send you the pack in due course, and it'd be great to have you on board, and also to get any feedback as well. So just if you say, actually, this could be really helpful for us, or this would have been, then we can at least sit down and reflect on that and see whether we update it in the future. I knew I'd get nailed for this, so it's Kitty. I saw the question about the plastic bottle. I was literally running here, and it was the only thing I could find. So you're right, I wouldn't normally drink from a plastic bottle, but apologies. I prioritize you ahead of my own conscience today. But I think there is an interesting debate about plastic, and I mean, plastic has been obviously talked about over and over and over and over and over, and the real challenges. And Coca-Cola is by far, I think, the largest single user, producer, and potentially polluter of plastic as a result of that. But I've also heard the counter arguments to that, which is particularly around the use of glass. And I'm convinced that Coke from a glass bottle tastes entirely differently than Coke from a tin, tastes entirely differently from Coke from plastic. So in the sense of taste, Coke from a plastic glass bottle is the preference. But glass is much heavier. It is more difficult to transport. It does have knock-on carbon impacts as well. I'm not in no way am any apologist for Coca-Cola, but I do know that they look at these things and they consider those things. It's important to consider them in the round. What is definitely important, and what something Coca-Cola could never invest enough in, is making it easy. As I was saying earlier, it needs to be easier for people to recycle electricals. It certainly needs to be made easier for people to recycle any food or beverage packaging. Okay, it's got a lot better, but there's always more that can be done. And it's the producers of that frankly, the producers of that packaging, they don't just produce what's inside it, they produce that packaging. Do you always need to be stepping up and doing more and making it easier? But you can also look at technological innovations, as I know there's stuff now around bioplastics and things like that. But also you need to be wary of unintended consequences too. If you introduce a new waste stream that no one really knows how to recycle, or the facilities are not there to recycle it, you could just be robbing from one problem to pay, another problem.
Thank you. Yeah, while the questions are coming, I could probably ask you another one is, so currently we have lots of supply chain issues because of the demands of our natural minerals. So here in the UK, have we got any urban mining industries in place to sort of mine these products that have been recycled and use the gold or these other rare earth minerals that could be used in other purposes, for example, because I see now new opportunities coming. So is that industry going to grow in terms of how we progress with e-waste here in the UK?
Yeah, we're starting to see that develop. I see, looking at names of who's on the call, but Mimi Moll's on the call. She's from an organization called N2S, who are looking at using I think it's bio-leaching. Don't shout at me if I get it wrong, but certainly using new techniques to recover precious and theoretically in the future critical raw materials from printed circuit boards here in the UK. And there are a couple of other initiatives now happening on that. And that's really exciting. So that's modular technology. So it's not the large, at the moment, printed circuit boards tend to be separated, bagged up and shipped to the continent because the economies of scale around it means that it's there is precious metal recovery, but it takes place in a hydrometallurgical process, huge furnaces basically. So there's only a couple of them dotted around the continent. But we could recover more materials, and that requires investment and innovation. And there's 2 or 3 UK-based organisations who are really looking into this and could be quite critical for the supply of those raw materials into the future. It's early days, but what's encouraging is that, what's encouraging is it's more than just one organisation looking at it as well. So there's, fingers crossed, there's hope there. And if people are interested in this, take a look at our website. There's a critical raw material report that's the sort of hopefully only the first report, not the last report we do on this. We can look at it again in 2 or 3 years and see what's happened to the industry.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a question that come up. So we've been asked is wondering if Material Focus worked on automotive treatment facilities in the UK. What can an automotive treatment facility do in initiating recycling in a country that does not yet have a recycling infrastructure? In order for stakeholders to understand its significance and become more engaged, governments, authorities, local councils, insurance companies.
No, we don't have a role yet to play in the automotive industry. We may start to be more interested when it comes to EV battery recycling and light mobility transport vehicle, so scooters and e-bikes. That's starting to creep into our purview now as we start to see EV batteries come back. So on a personal level, I'm really interested in it, and there's a lot of potential crossover. So in terms of the actual automotive system in the UK, it's been up and running for a long time. But my understanding of it with a traditional sort of petrol or diesel vehicle is it's tended to run itself outside of the regulations, really, because of the scrap metal value of cars. And that's on one side of things, if you're anti-regulation, that could be a good thing because you're not needing to intervene. But that's a similar case in the UK when it comes to large domestic appliances like washing machines and dishwashers, in that they tend to go down the scrap metal route. And that quality of recycling for scrap metal is not what it should be for an electrical, particularly when we know that some of these electricals might be containing persistent organic pollutants because of flame retardants that were used in them when people thought that was a good idea 20 odd years ago or so. So yeah, I can speak on a general level about it, but the automotive industry does recycle cars, but it tends to be in a grey area which isn't very regulated, which means that environmental standards may not be in all instances what we would hope them to be.
Okay, thank you. Kitty's asked a question about she upgrades her phone every 2 years due to security issues, rather than just wanting to have a new shiny toy every couple of years. Do you agree all devices tend to be more vulnerable in cybersecurity?
Oh, I'm not sure I could say for certain. I think there's cybersecurity in relation to the device, but I think a lot of cybersecurity is actually in relation to what the person is doing with the device as well. So, you know, there's a yin and yang to that, where so I don't personally feel an older phone is less secure. I think what I found interesting in the as we've returned to a more normal life where we're out and about, that I had I bought a refurbished phone I think just before, so probably 3 years ago, so just before pandemic, and then obviously we spent a lot of time at home, and so that I never had any issues with the battery life of that phone, because I never had to really test the battery life of that phone. But what I found over the last 6 months is that it's a refurbished phone with allegedly 80% battery performance for its original, but that 80% seems to manifest itself being like 3 hours in the sunshine, and then it starts to struggle. So I think for me, the issue with a lot of smart devices is the battery seems to not be, you know, always fit for purpose, and then therefore why is it so difficult to you know, get a new battery in and all those other things. But I've never really thought of it from a cybersecurity perspective. What we do know is that one of the reasons a lot of people hold on to technology is the uncertainty or fear of data issues. So one area that we need to work on and will be working on is trying to better help people either get access to the data to clean the device, or get reassured that in wiping the device they've done what they can do, so therefore that they're secure. But that's a lot of times the main reason people hold on to a data bearing device is that security risk, or the memory loss, you know, as in it's got photos on there, it's got something on there. One day they'll find a way to get it off. And of course, what in reality, the longer they leave it, the harder it will be to access what's there, because everything moves on as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking of an organization like Fairphone, which makes these modular phones. Maybe it's something that manufacturers should start thinking about, where, you know, they provision more of these modular type of phones.
Yeah.
Upgrade.
They're an interesting organization, and great at what they do. I mean, they've been around for a while. I think they're on version 4 or 5 now. And there was also a story in the press a couple of weeks ago that Nokia have launched a new smartphone range, which is and also at the same time making available through iFixit. I don't know if you've come across the website iFixit, which gives tips of fixing various tech ratings, I think, as well. They're making a repair kit available, so accessories and a repair kit available through iFixit too. So more moving into that space. I looked at it though and thought a little bit like, if you look at the repair kit's a lot of new stuff and if you only repair your phone once, it's got a special screwdriver, it's got a special, clip, it's got quite plastic metal. So it's like, does it really stack up in the sense? And that's the thing, we've got to be you've got to be pragmatic and realistic and think it through. But yeah, modular phone design. But then, Fairphone have been around for a while. They make what seem to be good phones, but it's it's been around long enough to show that it isn't an iPhone killer. And that's, I think, again, where you have to we have to be honest. It's about, if you want mass change, you have to think mass market. You have to think like those people. Otherwise, we will end up with lots of nice, well-meaning, interesting things and good for the small amount of people who can access them. But we all are living very, very busy lives, and what I do a lot of the time is having to say no to nice things for the same self-judgment of greater good. But actually, how do we make it easy for more people to do the right thing first? Because I think once we have that foundation of a good, easy to access network across the UK, we can add to that then, but at the moment, our foundation is almost non-existent. So we need to build a foundation before we build the elaborate ballroom or the snooker room or whatever fancy room we want to add to it. We need a foundations first.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's all about the user behavior. I think if we look at a lot of organizations now talking about their ESGs and their greenwashing about certain things, I think a lot of manufacturers probably need to look at design for the environment principles, and if they're really serious about how they take these products forward.
Yeah,
both in hardware and software.
Yeah, I mean, there are already a lot of tech will have recycled materials in it. Because recycled, particularly when you think about the aluminiums, the steels, the coppers of this world, because sometimes recycled aluminium and recycled steel can cost more on the open market than virgin stuff. So you've got, it's out there. It's just out in the real world. That's a great thing. Same with recycled plastic. You've got a weird thinking, because all food companies are wanting to tell their customers that they've got stuff, their packaging is made from recycled plastic rather than recyclable plastic or plastic. You actually have sometimes a market plays where recycled plastic has a greater value than new plastic because, somebody somewhere made a commitment in Danone that 50% of their coffee pots, that each coffee pot would be made from 50% recycled plastic. That's not a true stat or fact, but that idea. And then suddenly they've gone, shit, we've got to buy recycled plastic and it might not be available. And then they end up creating demand, the demand and supply pressures kick in and they're paying more because to meet a commitment that they've said. So you can have weird, perverse things going on. And yeah, a lot of tech will have recycled stuff in. And I know of companies that I can't name who have quietly gone around building and designing and producing with recycled metals, but have been reluctant to talk about it. This is the sort of, you get the unapologetic greenwash, then you get the more cynical Machiavellian greenwash, and then you get the green fear or something, I need a better phrase for it, where they're a bit like, we don't really want to talk about it because either we'll get lots of focus and people will think we're greenwashing sort of thing, which is, or sometimes they've said to I think this is less so because you've seen the rise of refurbished smartphone sales, but they've sort of gone, oh, we don't think our customers would actually they wouldn't go for the fact that it's got recycled in it. Might lower their vision of the quality of what we're putting out there. So we'll do it because it's the right thing to do. And we might talk about it in our ESG report, but we're not going to put it front and center in any marketing or anything like that, because they think sometimes it has the negative impression upon them, which is a bit weird, but they're basing that on some market research too. And I think that's the other thing is about mainstreaming this is that, yeah, it's sort of, you almost want the champion But is that a bit old school? Actually, we just want it to be normal. We want we just want as much material being recycled and going around all over the place. But it's not really a marketing tool at that point. It's not, look at us, we're great. It's just that it's more like, why, if you're not doing it, you're bad. I think that's the universe. Does that make sense? That's the universe that we want to get into. Is like, it's the absence of that behavior that becomes the news, rather than one, a great company like Fairphone. If that's the future, which is modularity, it should be, hey, you over there, hey, you, and I'm using an example, I'm not anti, I work for them, so I guess I'm not picking on them, but hey, you Samsung, everybody else is making modular phones, but you're in the olden days doing your super sleek ones. What's going on? People don't buy Samsung because they're against the grain. But of course, that's wishful thinking as well. But I think it being this should be normal. This should be normal. Businesses shouldn't throw away their tech. People shouldn't throw away their old toaster in the bin. But millions of people are doing that as it stands, and that's
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I don't see many questions coming up. So
There's one more from Mike. Can you see that? Mike Kretzis.
No, do you want to read it out, David? Sorry.
Yeah, so Mike says, I volunteer for a South London digital inclusion charity. We're always on the lookout for some old laptops, tablets, and smartphones, which we can repurpose and give out to local people. Any suggestions as to good sources of unwanted devices?
Yeah, there is. You could contact, I don't know if Mike knows of an organization called the Good Things Foundation. So they do a lot of work on digital inclusion. And remember, digital inclusion is not just a device. This is a really important thing. Digital inclusion is about a device. It's about data. There's no good you having a device if you can't access, the network to do it. But it's also about skills as well. So for a lot of people, obviously not. I think everybody on this call is probably skilled at using a computer and a smartphone, but there are a lot of people who don't have those skills. So it's a three-pronged thing. I'm sure Mike knows that very well. So yeah, Good Things Foundation. There is also an O2, now Virgin Media O2 initiative called Community Calling, I think, as well. So those two things might be worth a look for Mike.
Yeah, so there's no other questions. So I just like to say thank you very much for your presentation, Scott, and you've enlightened us and gives a lot of food for thought on how to think about recycling, especially as we celebrate Global Recycling Day on Saturday. And this presentation gives us an overview of your platform and how we can use your website and the advert that you talked about. We look out when it comes online and promote it amongst our friends and families and workplaces and our schools and universities, and hopefully they will use the resources that you've presented to us this evening. And I hope that everybody will agree that you've been so good that you've given us different perspectives on where we are going with the trends of e-waste, which is one of the largest wastes at the moment in the UK, and we have to do something about it as a community. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation, and thank everybody for joining in and attending and listening to Scott. And we'd like to have you back later, maybe during the International e-waste Day, to do something for us again.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for allowing me to bang on at you this evening.
Yes, and I just wanted to ask, Dalim, did you want to add anything else?
I think you've said it, Santana, and Scott, you've given us lots of great things to think about, and I'm sure we will take note of this and look forward to seeing you as well. at another time. All the best.
You too. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good evening. Bye.